It Never Rains in Hooterville is the 18th episode of the 4th season of 2.5 Men. This is directed by Gary Halvorson, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And I think it's an okay episode. It's definitely not a personal favourite, but there are some okay moments, and I will, as I said, go through the episode and share those moments. I don't have too many thoughts, to be honest. For me, it's very much an average episode, a few small things here and there. It starts off with actually a scene that I do think is quite memorable. Kandi is practicing for her audition, and Alan is reading lines with her, and she's wanting to play this forensic scientist, and it's on a show called Stiffs, and basically she has her chest exposed the entire time. There's no way she's getting the job. We'll see how that goes. Just as she leaves the house, Alan asks her if she got the divorce papers, to which she replied, "Not really, but my lawyer explained it all," which I did like. I did enjoy that joke. Then there's some knocking, and I like the fact that we have a bit of suspense for maybe 40 seconds. I didn't time it, but a little bit of suspense as we try and work out where this knocking is coming from. Turns out it's Jake's bedroom, and he's nailing up posters of, well, barely dressed women. And Alan realises Jake's grown up, and he watches some baby videos of Jake. And the next thing we know, they're camping together. Alan is trying to cling on to what he has left of Jake's childhood before Jake grows up and will want to spend his weekends doing his own thing rather than staying with his father. And the camping scene was quite nice. It makes me want to go camping because I'd love the idea of being in a tent with the rain lashing outside, but I'd also be very, very, very scared. So I would probably never do it, but I quite liked the scene. And my favourite moment in the whole episode is when they come back home from camping. Very quickly, the scene didn't last long at all. And the door opens and just Jake's appearance, the state of him, he looks probably the way he feels. And I found that very, very funny. And Alan then goes over to Candi's, and I think this was quite an interesting scene because we learn ultimately why Alan and Kandi decided to end their marriage. There were apparently lots of little reasons, and Kandi is quite happy to name those little reasons, but the big reason they didn't go ahead with trying to rectify the relationship is that Kandi wanted a child, and Alan didn't want to have another baby. And Alan's decided that actually he'd like another baby. Obviously, because Jake's growing up, he feels like this is an opportunity to have a new chapter. And it definitely seems like a very rushed decision on Alan's part. But because it's what Kandi wants, she decides they can just make the baby there and then. And that's what they're about to do. We'll come back to that in a moment. Meanwhile, Charlie has a talk with Jake and basically explains to him why Alan is trying to do all of these activities with him. And it was a very well written talk, very well delivered, and I rather enjoyed that. It was a nice uncle and nephew bonding moment, and I think it was a really eye-opening opportunity for Jake, because I can't remember much about how I felt about adults being that age, but I imagine adults do a lot of weird things, or things that seem weird when you're younger. And Jake did need it explained to him why Alan was behaving that way. So I really liked that scene. I thought it was very well done. And then we're back with Alan and Kandi. They're in bed about to make the baby. And then Candi's phone rings. And the next thing we know is she signed the divorce papers. And then she's accepted the job as the forensic scientist, or forensic investigator, rather, which was an interesting moment. I think not what I expected. I've seen this episode before, so I knew how it played out, but I definitely think it's a very unpredictable moment. And of course, she signed those divorce papers so that they were no longer legally married and she didn't have to give Alan anything. And then the show ends with the three of them, Alan, Jake, and Charlie, watching a clip from the show. And I have to say, I'm glad they included a clip of the show. It was quite fun to see. And not entirely sure how much time had passed from the previous scene to this scene, but it was great to see Candi's performance, and honestly, it didn't look quite as corny as it might have done. I'm not saying it looked good, but they could probably get away with it. Maybe not, maybe that's too much, but either way, it looked pretty good. And Jake then decided to go off and spend some time with his posters, which was an interesting way to end things, I guess. So it's not a bad episode. Personal highlights: the camping scene, Jake's appearance after camping, and Charlie's talk with Jake. Definitely not an all-time favourite episode, but I wouldn't mind watching it again. I'm sure I will at some point. It might not be the funniest episode, but I'd still say it's not too bad.